Hi everybody, this is Team NJ and K with our final reflections on the other group's reflections. My name's Crystal.
Jennifer.
And Nicole. So we're going to start off with kind of the reflection on the other group's community service projects and reflection on their takeaways. So first up is Team 6. They worked at Goodwill, kind of sorting and sorting through all the donations. And one thing that they took away that we also took away as a group is how they bonded more through kind of the physical labor aspect, because you got to kind of interact and deal with tasks. They definitely got more out of the community service project as well than the initial group, the group stand-up activities, which we kind of got a lot out of the group stand-up activities. But personally, we got a lot more through the community service project. So that was Team 6.
So next up was Dream Team, and they did a Humane Society adoption weekend. And the thing that we took away from there was their perseverance through minor hiccups to end up with an outstanding feedback from the director that was in charge of their weekend. That was something that happened similar to us. We had a couple of minor hiccups with the runaway trailer and some things during our community service project. But in the end, Bethany was very pleased with our work and would be happy to have us back.
To be fair, I don't think Bethany knew about the runaway trailer.
It was a runaway trailer into a shooting range to add the icing on the cake with that one.
A little bit of drama there. It was okay.
It was a lot of fun.
We recovered though.
All right, next up we wanted to talk about Fantastic Five, and they actually did some work at the food bank, kind of packing up boxes and putting meals together and that kind of thing. And what we kind of took out of this is this group didn't actually do all 15 hours all together as a group. They kind of did, it seemed like they did the first session all together and then kind of broke it up into pairs. So we feel like by doing it that way, they kind of lost out on learning how to manage their schedules, and kind of because they didn't spend all the time together like the rest of the groups, they lost out on some team building and bonding time as well.
So next up is Team BLCM. So they worked at the Hope House auction, and we were actually kind of jealous and impressed with this community service because they got to apply a lot of Carnegie. They got to walk around talking with potential donors, and it was really cool to hear, you know, they applied Carnegie through focusing on to remember names, focusing on politely starting up conversations to get people in kind of in the moods to do the whole charity fundraising donation part. So that was a really cool community service project that sounded like they got a lot of good real life applications out of that service project.
So next was Running on Empty, and we weren't able to figure out exactly what this team did. In their video, if you like when you're watching, it seems like they did something over at Hazel Wild having to do with horses. So I don't know if it was, you know, taking care of them, cleaning out stalls. We're not quite entirely sure what they did. We would have loved to have heard more about that experience.
Okay, and the last group we want to touch on is Team NAC, and they actually worked at the Brisbane Homeless Shelter. It seems like they did a lot of filing and organizing, and what we kind of found out from their talk about it is the shelter has a very outdated filing system that was set up for a much smaller list of clients than what they have developed. So because of that, their filing has just been out of control, hasn't been kept up on. And Team NAC kind of compared their volunteer work there as, you know, putting a Band-Aid on the situation where surgery was really needed. But because they had to go into that situation, they learned, you know, organization is important, and hitting up a problem head on and solving it before it gets out of control is really important. So that was a good takeaway they had from that experience.
The first thing that kind of comes to mind too with that experience is, what I'm sure I think they've touched on a little bit too is, how could we have made this better? When you're in that situation, when you're coming into a new project or a new program that's in that crazy situation, it's a lot of how do I make this better and how do I try to perform surgery instead of continuously putting Band-Aids on. So that was a good, interesting project as well.
Yeah.
So overall, we have recurring themes and takeaways.
Yep. So overall, the biggest recurring theme that we heard through almost all of the videos was Carnegie. It seemed to be a big takeaway for all of us, as far as taking and applying those Carnegie concepts in both at the workplace and in situations like BLCM when they were doing the auction. I know that, again, we touched on it previously in our video. Like, I plan on going back and rereading it and using that book in the way I think Carnegie intended it, which was to be a workable manual.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And that was kind of a recurring theme throughout the groups. They all said, pretty much that they applied Carnegie in some way or another actually during their volunteer projects. Like, I know we did with the problem solving and, like, just getting to know who we were working for. Another thing was that everybody kind of mentioned gaining confidence in the personal interpretation. So, like, with the group, with the, individual assignments and that kind of thing, they were very open for interpretation. And at the beginning of the semester, people were very, hesitant about that. All the questions were like, well, how is this supposed to be done? How do you want this? And towards the end of the semester, people were just kind of like, well, this is how I interpret it, so this is how I'm going to do it. And I think that's kind of the point. And it also, it helps you gain confidence, not just in class, but overall as a person, being able to make those decisions on your own without maybe guidance of a professor or a manager or something like that.
Yeah, I know I personally gained a lot of confidence through this class, and as well as many others mentioned that this was the first time for blogging. This was the first time for me blogging. I'm not a writer. I'm a math numbers person. So just learning how to kind of get your thoughts and your opinions out there on a blog post while needing to maintain kind of that confidence level that what you're doing is good. It definitely helped me to develop that more, as well as not to kind of second guess yourself. I mean, you're reading these directions, you're reading these criteria, and you need to make a decision. You can't just keep on stewing or festering on what does this actually mean. Another recurring theme was that the groups across this class as a whole have all had really positive experiences with their groups. A lot of them have said, including us, that this has been the best group experience of their galactic career.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. And that actually had me thinking about, like, why is that the case?
Mm-hmm.
And I've been chewing on that for quite a bit. And I think some of it does trace back to the initial, like, group formation videos that we did.
Mm-hmm.
With just putting that information out there in forefront of everybody's brains of, like, don't be that guy. Like, don't be the one that's the dictator, like, and takes over everything. Don't be the slacker that everybody has to take up for. So I've been chewing on that quite a bit. And then in addition to that, how do I now take this information and carry it into the workplace? And I don't quite have an answer to that yet. I think that's something I'm still ruminating on.
Well, so I'll aid. I'll kind of, if I can jump in a little bit on that one. So with my company, the owner of my company is always handing out management books for everyone to read. Like, If you work there long enough, you're going to have a bookshelf full of his books. And his new one for how we performed our budget development process for this next coming year was his favorite book was called Traction. And part of that is, upfront identifying what the roles, responsibilities are, the goals. And that's like a big part of having a successful managing group, is to upfront take this lesson that we had when we had to go through what our roles and responsibilities were, which allowed us to run very smoothly. That's going to be very critical in your professional career. So that first day, that first group activity we had to do, I think that is going to be kind of how to carry this out into the world. Is don't just get into a group and start running.
Right. Take the time to establish.
Yeah.
Definitely. It was a painful process, but it really set the group up for success in the end, which, I guess was the point, and we just didn't see it as we were doing
As
it.
we were doing it at the time. Like, we could see it looking backwards.
Yeah.
But some things that the other groups brought up that we didn't necessarily think about. One of the biggest ones that we saw is a couple of the groups were comparing Blink versus Carnegie, and some stating a preference for one over the other. I know that we as a group tended to go back to Carnegie. We didn't tend to discuss a lot of Blink.
At all.
Really at all, but it was really interesting to see how other groups interpreted that. And
it seems to me that they actually had conversations about which one, which one they preferred.
Right.
And I think all of us just preferred Carnegie, so we never really opened up that conversation. But it has kind of gotten us thinking about what were the differences and kind of reflecting a little bit more on those two readings.
Watching the videos kind of opened up that conversation for our group, whereas it hadn't existed beforehand.
Yeah.
So one of the other things we noticed, Team 6 especially brought this up, whereas they, the information on being interviewed was very important to them. It was one of their biggest takeaways, whereas our group more looked at it as, from a management standpoint, what to look for when you're interviewing someone. And that kind of goes back to, you can see in the groups where there's differences between the normal stereotypical undergraduate student, I guess you could say, as opposed to a group like ours where we're all adults. We've basically been to college before. We're out in the workforce working full time. And we took this class because we needed something to meet our schedules. We're not on campus every day, all day, like some of the other students. And I think that's part of what that led into, just seeing those differences and how they took it versus how we interpreted it.
Yeah, and kind of like a segue, that kind of segues into kind of the different perceptions on the relevance of information with the kind of the picture perfect undergrad situation where you're going straight from high school to college. A lot of people didn't necessarily find some of this stuff relevant. Even Dream Team, they have a couple of people that are in the workforce, and they didn't really they found that this was too vague, I guess. But we as a group, we think that this class was very, very pointed towards management, and management is vague. Management concepts are kind of the same throughout the different industries. It's just how you're going to apply them. But I definitely think that with us being in the workforce already, we are able to take a lot of that management information and see how important it is in being successful for the future. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So in conclusion, seeing the differences between the undergrad version reviews and perceptions of the course and seeing the opinions of other people kind of in our shoes has been very interesting.
And I think that's applicable too to the workforce, because you have generational differences in an office building. So that's
Definitely,
that's
yeah.
something that can be applied across the board. Like our differences in perception, you're going to get those differences in perception no matter where you are.
Yep. All right. Well, that is all we have for you today. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.